Hi, Mr. Flying Bird. Today, we're going to discuss Hofstede's dimensions. Before we dive into the lecture, let's introduce the founder of the cultural dimensions theory. Hofstede was a Dutch social psychologist and a former employee of IBM. This is where he was able to conduct his study on 100,000 employees of IBM. After this, he concluded that there is a specification on how the culture is impacted in the workplace. The four dimensions of culture he identified were the power distance, individualism versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance, and masculinity versus femininity. The fundamental issue here is how a society handles inequalities among people. If you look to the chart on the right, China and Ecuador are countries with a high power index, whereas New Zealand and Germany are countries with low power index. Low power distance members value democracy and equality. People in high distance countries tend to believe that power and authority are facts of life. An example of high power distance is one where students are not allowed to argue with their professors or disagree with their bosses. An example of low power distance is where students are allowed to freely express their opinions in disagreement and also are considered in hearing their thoughts when in a corporate environment. An interesting situation is when a professor from a high power distance country, such as India, moves to a low power distance country, such as the US, and strives to continue their profession as a professor. It may come as a shock to them that the students' behaviors are different in both countries, resulting in a tough situation for the professor to adjust to. Individualism is I-centered, focusing on self-sufficiency, while collectivism is we-focused, regarding concern for other group members. Cultures in the US, Germany, and Australia tend to be individualistic, and cultures in Asia, Central America, South America, and Africa tend to be more collectivistic. Low uncertainty avoidance can be seen in Great Britain, China, India, and the US, where there are less adherence to rules. In countries like Japan, Germany, and Spain, there is a need for a more stable and predictable workplace, which makes them have a high uncertainty avoidance. For example, if you go to a country like India, people are less willing to follow rules, and a prime example of that is not following the rules on the road. Because of that, there is lots of road rage and traffic. In the business context, masculinity versus femininity is sometimes also related to as tough versus tender cultures. A high score, which is masculine, on this dimension indicates that the society will be driven by competition, achievement, and success. A low score, feminine, on this dimension means that the dominant values in the society are caring for others and quality of life. A feminine society is one where quality of life is the sign of success and standing out from the crowd is not admirable. The fundamental issue here is what motivates people, whether it's wanting to be the best, which is masculine, or liking what you do, which is feminine. Seen in the chart, China is given a value of 66, which defines it as a masculine society. An example of this is that Chinese people will sacrifice family time and leisure priorities to work. Another example is that Chinese students care very much about their exam scores and ranking to achieve success. A fifth dimension that was later added is called Confucian dynamism, also called long-term orientation. Societies with long-term orientation, such as most East Asian societies, embrace future-oriented virtues, such as thrift, persistence, and perseverance. Societies with short-term orientation, like the UK, foster values such as respect for tradition and reciprocation of greetings, favors, and gifts. Now that you know the entire theory, the question asked is whether this is still relevant. Some of the flaws are that this was only used as a single source from IBM, and also that culture evolves and does not stay static. It is relevant in the sense that it proposes implications of how cultures will differ, but since culture changes over time, it can also be modified. Thank you for watching my lecture tutorial on Hofstede's dimensions. Hope you were able to learn something, and I hope you have a great flight.